get our mic?
Sorry, I'm a low talker. Sorry. I think we've been fortunate in New York State. My friends in Queens and in the New York City region argue that their home values have been pretty consistent, so I'm happy about that. And I think property values overall haven't experienced the drops that a large portion of the country has. I think that people have moved for more affordable housing and jobs. And I'd like to get some clarification on what legislation has been passed that's been co-sponsored, that has actually passed, that's created infrastructure and jobs in this area in the last 2 years, or if you are not elected, what legislation you would co-sponsor or support that would create infrastructure, because in Orange County in particular, the jobs there, or the people that I know and live with in Goshen, are largely manual labor, blue collar. We definitely have lots of doctors in our area and lawyers, but most of the ones that I know are teachers, police officers, construction, electricians, plumbers, firemen, lots. So thank you, that's my question.
Well, thanks for that question. It's a very important question. I have worked on a number of pieces of legislation. We've been, as you know, just, you know, Democrats and Republicans together work very nicely in the House of Representatives. So we have passed through the House dozens of pieces of legislation to help the economy and to help build more infrastructure, to help reduce energy prices, to make it easier for small businesses and larger ones to grow and to hire. Most of those pieces of legislation have not been acted on by the Senate. But in terms of the ones that have been acted on, that we have managed to pass, I can think of a couple right off the bat. One is the Jobs Act. And I was one of the proponents and voices for the Jobs Act. It passed through the House and the Senate, and the President signed it into law in March. And what the Jobs Act does is make it easier for small startup companies, again, the engines of growth, that makes an easier path by cutting down on regulations, by making them more sensible for these small companies to be able to attract investors and grow and hire. And we have seen already some beneficial effects of that in terms of enabling some of these little companies to go public. It also allows more opportunity for Americans to invest in companies like that, and so that they can, you know, grow their own money in good ways. So that's one. We passed a highway bill. We passed a 2-year highway bill, and that's very important to our Hudson Valley, because I've been one of the key voices to provide the federal funding that we need to build the Tappan Zee Bridge, to reconstruct the Tappan Zee Bridge. That's a very important engine for our economy in the Hudson Valley, not only in terms of course, the hundreds of jobs that will come, and I work with our construction contractors and our you know, our trades and all the people who want to see, the local businesses, the local organizations who want to see that Tappan Zee Bridge happen, and with Governor Cuomo, again, Republican and Democrat together. You know, I work very closely with the governor on this. So I've been instrumental in making sure that we get the funding, the federal aid that we need for the Tappan Zee Bridge. More broadly, I have obviously been a voice for making sure that the federal government has a budget the way you do in your own homes, the way people here in the Hudson Valley have to have a budget. Unfortunately, it's true, the Senate hasn't passed a budget in over 3 years now. And unless we have a budget, we really don't have a sense of how we get trillion-dollar deficits under control. But we certainly, the sense that all of us have is that we can't keep going on the path that we're on. So I was certainly on the conference committee. I was one of 8 members of the House of Representatives who was put on the committee to work with, and this was another piece of legislation that I was instrumental in that we did pass and was signed by the President. We worked with the Senate to make sure that the 2% payroll tax holiday was extended through the year, to make sure that Medicare reimbursements for our seniors for their care was extended through the end of this year. And also we worked to make sure that federal unemployment benefits were carried through, but also were made more sensible. So that's something that I worked on very directly and was able to pass. There's a lot more opportunity that we have, and working with our Democratic colleagues, I intend to get a lot more done as we go along.
Well, thank you. I'm telling people can't see us. Is this better? What's your name?
Debbie.
Debbie. Well, listen, the Congresswoman just said something that I've never heard anybody say before, which is that Democrats and Republicans have been working well in Washington together. But if I must be watching a different cable channel, because the Congress I've seen is not working at all. It spends all its time fighting and none of its time working on real problems. Let me tell you about a guy named Jim Taylor in Orange County, who's trying to do a biomass business, waste energy business in Montgomery, right outside Newburgh. Right? He's got $45 million of his own skin in the game. This is a private sector Republican job creator. His project is supported by Republican electeds up and down the line, from the county executive, Eddie Diana, to Nancy Calhoun, the Republican assemblywoman, to Bill Larkin, the Republican state senator. He wants to create energy out of waste products. He's got new technology that does it really efficiently. He's got a long-term power purchasing agreement with the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey to put 20 megawatts of renewable power right on the grid and power Stewart Airport. It's right next door. He's got the ground level ready for steel and concrete, 300 good union jobs tomorrow, 80 permanent jobs. And he can put one of these facilities at 900 locations around the United States. And it'd be based right there in Orange County. And the people in Newburgh who need the jobs as much as just about anybody in the Hudson Valley are right there ready to take them. That's a private sector job creator. He needs a federal loan, a federal loan guarantee. The Congresswoman opposed it. And Jim Taylor said to the Times Herald Record, she's killing us. She's killing small business. Because the difference between the Congresswoman and myself is that I believe the government has a role to play. I believe the government has to be a partner to private sector job creators. I've spent most of my career working on public-private partnerships. When I worked in the governor's office, I created the Public-Private Partnership Commission in New York, so we could get massive new investments in New York infrastructure. So you can mention the Tappan Zee Bridge, that's great, but the fact of the matter is that the Congresswoman has not brought $1 back to New York for that project. I created the commission in New York to fund it through private dollars, with private sector capital working alongside public dollars. Because I don't think the government should do everything, but I think the government has a role to play. And this is the kind of thing that's going to create good jobs. What else we can do is on the property of the Port Authority right there at Stewart Airport, we could create a regional food hub. We could get our farmers and our growers bringing their products right there for distribution in New York City. We could incubate small businesses in the same locality with a partnership for the Culinary Institute of America right there, right on the same property, so that you had food and beverages businesses, private businesses, starting right there in Orange County. And if you did that, and you did the infrastructure improvements, and you did projects like Taylor Biomass, you would have that great housing stock in Newburgh restored. There's great houses, you know this, in Newburgh. Views of the river, great old bones. There's some of the nicest houses in the county right there, and they've just gotta have some investment put back into them. That means people gotta have jobs. People gotta have money in their pockets. The building trades love this project. She won't support it. All of the Republicans up and down the line support it. She won't support it. Why? Because unfortunately, there is a Tea Party ideology that says the government is always the problem. The government has no role to play. The government can't help us support private sector job creators. And that's just the difference in this election. And what I think we got to do is we got to work together.
Another question, please. Donald? Here.
All right, this is for both the candidates. I think everybody here would agree that liquidity is the key to real estate recovery. And of course, with real estate recovery comes jobs. People buy cars, there's construction going on, refrigerators, large cost items. What I'd like to know is I think it's a portion of government and privatization. And I'd like to know, number one, why Congress didn't pass keeping the increased $729,000 value for Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac would have helped. I'm glad that we kept FHA. because we needed it for the recovery, but we also had it for Fannie Mae, but I think there was some internal politics going on, and they didn't extend, you know, the 729 limit. And I still think we're still in the recovery stage until 2014 or 2015. So I would hope that either of the two of you would go back and try to continue having that, although the real key here is the mortgage-backed security market, and I think you mentioned it in your literature, Nan, about the covered loans. And we need a mortgage-backed security market, once again, privatized mortgage-backed security market, so that we're not just selling loans to Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac and FHA. We need to have some sort of privatization as well as the continued government assistance. So I'd like to have your opinion on that.
No, thanks for that question. I actually did support keeping the rate at 729 in HR 2112, but all of these pieces of legislation also have to pass the Senate, so I understand how delicate these issues are within our marketplace that's still recovering. But I do support, obviously, a robust private investment. I think we have to keep moving toward that, mainly because, look, all of you are men and women who have businesses, or you work in small businesses in our community. And I like to think, it is my belief, you know, I believe in you. I believe in the decisions that you make at the level of our communities, at the level of your business, that you make far better than someone in Washington does, than a Washington bureaucrat does. We ended up in the mess that we did because Washington forced a lot of people, a lot of enterprise, a lot of the housing sector to make decisions that didn't make sense. Washington made it almost impossible for community banks to make sensible decisions about where to place their investments. They made it almost impossible for mortgage lenders to make decisions that were the most sensible. And we ended up instead with a whole lot of Americans experiencing a terrible loss that they are still trying to recover from. They're underwater on their mortgages. There was way too much going out the door toward trying to pay for these pieces of property that they couldn't afford, and there wasn't enough going into other parts of the economy that actually could have grown those local jobs in places like our Hudson Valley. And we can't afford for Washington to keep doing that. And that's the problem, by the way, with the Department of Energy loan program. You know, Taylor Biomass, I visited too. And I had a good, very respectful talk with Mr. Taylor. And you know, I wanted to thrive. I wanted to do well. I wish him well. I think it's a great thing for the Hudson Valley to have a new business that will thrive and grow jobs. But the Department of Energy loan program, that, by the way, I never said to the Department of Energy, don't fund Taylor Biomass. And when they needed some help on their paperwork, I actually provided that help, even though he's not in my district, as it currently stands. But the problem is that when Washington tries to put your dollars into businesses that may actually not be ready to go the way they say they'll be, when they make political decisions about those things, and I'm talking about the loan program in general, not about Taylor Biomass specifically, when they do those things, they waste your dollars. That's how we got Solyndra. That was $535 million. That's a lot of money. And that was dollars that were wasted, because it really wasn't a good business. It wasn't a smart thing to invest in. But Washington took your dollars and did it anyway, because someone in Solyndra had a lot of friends in the government. I don't want that to happen to what you work so hard for. Your dollars are precious and they need to be used sensibly. We have a federal government that has a lot it has to do right. It has to do Social Security and Medicare right. It has to help those most in need. We have Medicaid, we have food stamp programs, we have all sorts of backups in the social safety net that we want to keep going in the right kind of way. But none of them are going to work, our defense isn't going to work, our interstate highways aren't going to run, we're not going to get the infrastructure maintenance we need if we take your very hard-earned dollars and waste them. And that's all I'm about. Respecting you, respecting the work you do, and making sure that smart Americans who know how to use those dollars in their own communities have the money they've earned in their pockets so that they can do it. And that's why I do everything I do. But I agree with you on the marketplace. I think we need to provide mechanisms that will let people invest more easily and more readily. We need to make sure that Washington is not trying to micromanage your business or your finances, because it leads to tragedy, and that's what we saw in 2008. So thank you for that question.
Well, one of the things people don't know about me is that, I ran a business for 3 years. When I left the White House, I ran a software company for 3 years. We created hundreds of good jobs right here in New York. And so I had to make a payroll. I had to make decisions about health care for my employees. There are still hundreds of people today who look back on that company as an important part of their career. So I understand the role of the private sector, and this is one of the areas where the Congresswoman and I actually agree on certain things. I think we ought to do a lot of things in to reform Fannie and Freddie, but we should mend it, not end it. I mean, there are guys in Washington, these Tea Party guys, and unfortunately my opponent is right out there in the crowd with them, who just want to go in there with a chainsaw and cut the thing up. And that is going to be the single best way, besides ending the mortgage interest deduction, to destroy the industry you all work in. If you go take away, Fannie and Freddie do half of the $12 trillion mortgage business in the United States. And we better take that very seriously. And we better not let ideology or some political argument get in the way of something that is holding up a really fragile industry right now. And if you look at the way it worked when I was in the White House in the 90s, and where you had higher standards, where you had better regulation, better oversight. And there are lots of ways we can run that better. And I am not opposed to a U.S. covered bond program. I think there's some very interesting ideas about creating competition in the private sector, and I think that would be one of the areas where we could agree. I don't have any problem with that. I think the devil's in the details, and like a lot of these things, if you turn it over to the guys on Wall Street, because that's where a lot of the interest is in this, then you better watch it like a hawk, and you better be very careful about how you structure it. Now, when it comes to the role of government, we've got to work together. This is the thing. I think when you say we've got important things to do like Medicare and like Medicaid and like food stamps, right now there's a farm bill that won't pass the House of Representatives because the Congresswoman and her Tea Party friends think we're not cutting food stamps enough. That's what's holding up the farm bill that passed the Senate with a huge bipartisan majority. The Congresswoman and her friends in the House are holding it up over cutting food stamps more. If Medicare is so important, well, why are we trying to end it? Why are we trying not to reform it instead of ending it? Like a bedrock program that for 47 years, through terrorist attacks and wars and all kinds of economic crises, has fulfilled its promise to the people who've been paying into it for years. I do not believe now is the time to end Medicare simply because we want to give trillions of dollars in tax cuts to multimillionaires at the very top of the spectrum. So I think we got to get our priorities straight. And one of the things we got to do is we got to stop drinking the Kool-Aid that says government is the source of all our problems or government is the solution to all our problems. We all know it's neither. We all know that it has a role to play. It has a role to play. And Jim Taylor has $45 million of his own money in the game. If that's not skin in the game, I don't know what is. But boy, he needs a federal partner. And he'll tell you don't need to believe me, he'll tell you what help he's gotten from his congressional representative. The answer is zero. And there are 300 people who aren't working right now in Orange County because of that. It's just that simple. And we've seen what works. We've seen what works. We can go back to low inflationary, robust growth with a sensible fiscal policy that is paying down the debt, that is continuing to fund our objectives in innovation and infrastructure, that puts people first. We've been here before. We've got to remember who we are as Americans and as citizens. That's what I want to do. I want to do what makes sense, and I am not going to worship the altar of any ideology, either Democrat or Republican. I am going to relentlessly work on solutions that put people at the center of our politics and support middle-class families. Thank you.
Okay, we're still on schedule. We have time, I would say, for at least one, possibly two more questions. Eve? Okay.